Our first topic here at Stage 1 for the day is investment. Investments are key to any industry's ecosystem, and the world of blockchain is no different. Let's see how things are going for startups, institutions, and investors themselves. Welcome to our first panel for investments. You've seen him on TV, and you've probably heard or read his thoughts on the price of crypto. How does he do it, and what does he think will happen in 2020? This is Crypto Predictions in 2020 by Thomas Lee, Managing Partner and Head of Research at FunStrat Global Advisors. 36K or 3.6K? Doom and gloom or a rally in sight? Bitcoin permabull Thomas Lee gives his views into the price of crypto, its effects, and what we should all watch out for in 2020. If you have any questions for Tommy, please go to www.slido.com, enter the code BlockShow 2019, select Stage 1, scan the QR code that appears on the screen, and simply write down your question. Now, please welcome Thomas Lee and moderator ADDY CREZEE, CEO at BlockShow.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
So, crypto predictions for 2020. It's a pretty nice topic, but before we go deep into your thoughts on what's going to happen and so on and so forth, can you, for those who don't know in detail what FunStrat is doing, could you kindly introduce FunStrat and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, glad to. FunStrat is an independent research advisory firm. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, so we survived the normal mortality, so we're alive and prospering. We have today primarily an institutional research business, over 150 clients in 16 countries. And the bulk of our work is on understanding traditional financial markets, using demographics, evidence-based research, a lot of our cycle theory, but we combine that with technical analysis and policy research. But in the past few years, we've invested a lot of time on digital assets and crypto. We're very bullish on the long-term prospects for that. And we've begun to create a sort of a tier of our product for individuals. So if you want to, we have a booth out here. And 2 of our research guys are there, and they have a lot of swag. If you want to get a pop socket or a wallet or, those insulated cups, that we've got them all there. But that's our business.
But Bitcoin research, as I understand, is just a small portion of it, right?
Yes, it's seeing parabolic growth. So just like adoption, it's growing very quickly. But it's a very small part of our business. And, it mirrors basically the financial market. Equities is a $66 trillion business. Yeah. Crypto is $200 billion. So you can imagine the size differences.
So how big is the difference when analyzing it, right? Because in traditional markets, you have CEOs, you have reports, I don't know, companies have KPIs, whatever, right? In crypto, especially in Bitcoin, there is nothing like that, right? There is no face. So what's the fundamental difference? How do you do that?
It's completely different. What you have to keep in mind is, traditional markets, at FunStrat, a lot of our data sets are 100 years of daily history. Sector data, stock level price data, volume. So we have 10 times the amount of data available when studying traditional markets than crypto, because Bitcoin is the longest chain and it's less than 10 years old. But that is not a problem. I started my career 27 years ago following the wireless industry. And in 1993, there were only 27 million cellular phones in the world. There's 4.5 billion today. So wireless had zero history, but telecoms, which we used to call plain old telephone service, POTS, had 100 years. So to me, reframing and understanding growth markets is easy, but in crypto, that means you can't rely on the data as much because the growth is more important.
Okay, so let's say I'm an investor, right? And I want to step into the crypto market, right? So what can I expect from FunStrat? Because as I understand, your view and your analysis on crypto is more long-term, right? I mean, like, if I want to, I don't know, step in 2020, let's say.
Well, I mean, you have to remember the long term is a series of short terms. So
Agree.
so anything we do in crypto, it's really weighing the impact of 10 years versus 3 months. You know, you can't, anytime you focus on something that's got a lot of growth, you can't be too focused on what you'd call intrinsic value. You know, like how much has been accumulated by what the network has achieved today, if much more growth is achieved in the future. And things that affect the future are regulatory changes. You know, we're really involved on the policy side, adoption, and you know, we're at FunStrat, you know, really involved with a lot of the infrastructure players. So we're following what's happening there. And of course, you know, we're quite global as a firm. We have clients in 16 countries. But we don't want to ignore the short term because the series of short terms is the long term. So we do have a technician that looks at technicals. And I think we're going to invest quite a lot of time on DeMark studies. So we're building infrastructure around supporting systematic knowledge around using DeMark indicators. And if you guys don't know who DeMark is, Tom DeMark is the father of all quantitative and systematic. I mean, he is the god. And we're going to invest a lot of time really sort of building that and incorporating that to our process.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about 2019 and then before we step into the 2020, right? I do remember November 2018, you were, right now you're sitting, at that time you were standing at the BlockShow stage.
Upstairs.
Upstairs. When everyone was saying crypto is dying, crypto winter, blah, blah, blah. But you were the speaker actually who was absolutely opposite to that, right? So you're saying that's the right time to invest into cryptocurrencies, right? So what can you say at the end of 2019? How was this year to you personally?
Yeah.
Negative, positive, pros and cons?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2019 kind of had a couple of phases. You know, I think the first part of the year is probably best described as dry powder. You know, I think that a lot of the original crypto investors who were liquidating their positions in 2018 put it back into Tether or USD, and that's a huge amount of dry powder. That's what was put to work at the start of this year, and I think that's what helped get Bitcoin towards, high 9,000s or whatever. And then we had what looked like a cadence of really good developments from Bakkt to Facebook Libra that I think if it was sustained was really going to grow the adoption this year. But it didn't happen because then we started to see sort of setbacks, especially coming from the White House. So I think the crypto, which really should have been I think by mid-year, I think you could have made the argument Bitcoin should have made all-time highs by the end of this year. I think it suffered regulatory setbacks in America. And I think that's why we're back sort of at this 8,000 level. And unfortunately, one thing that we use at FunStrat is this thing called the Bitcoin Misery Index. It peaked in July at 60, maybe at 72, but once that breaks down below 66, basically the bull run is largely over, and it broke down and is now suffering at 43. So I think we're not in crypto winter again. It's a consolidation, and I think 2020 is, Bitcoin's really well positioned because the S&P has finally made new highs.
Well, we'll talk about 2020 and the factors a little bit more, and the regulators and Libra. Just finishing the topic of 2019, right? So we are not in crypto winter, but what about the size of the market, right? Because generally speaking, lots of media say it's millions of users, right? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's estimates all over the place. I think maybe the median estimate is people say 30 million people own Bitcoin around the world. And I think at one point it's possible that maybe 30 million people at one point might have owned Bitcoin. But I think today the market is vastly, vastly smaller. Maybe we're extreme, but we think it's about 500,000 people. And
How do you get this amount? 500,000. That's pretty small.
yeah, it's very small. It would be the equivalent, okay, of an exchange saying that less than 1% of its users are active. And I believe many exchanges would actually say that. I think it's probably generous. Now, someone might say, oh, well, there was a survey that just came out from Australia and says 16% of adults have Bitcoin. I'm going to tell you why it doesn't make sense. The majority of holders of Bitcoin are between the ages of 30 and 45, okay? Maybe even 25 and 35. In Australia, that's about 28% of the adult population. If 16% of adults own Bitcoin, it's the equivalent of saying 60% of people in that age group own Bitcoin. There's no way that 6 out of 10 people in that age group own Bitcoin. It's probably 16% of 25 to 35-year-olds, and then you have to divide it by 3, so it's 5% at most.
I got what you're coming from. Okay, let's go into 2020, right? And what factors will influence the markets? It's Libra, China's blockchain, halving, all of these things, right? Let's start with Libra because you've already mentioned that, right? So actually in 2018, at BlockShow you said that 2019 is the year for tech giants to step into the industry. Then we've seen Facebook announcing Libra. Then we've seen public hearings of Mark Zuckerberg, right? So let's say for 2020, failure or success of Libra, how will it really influence the market? And if it will?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. I think Libra is one of the most important projects for crypto because it's really the roadmap to get America mainstream Bitcoin adoption. It's not necessarily the mainstream to how Asia will adopt Bitcoin, but it's really how the US will. And you have to remember, 1/3 of all global wealth, 100 trillion, not 100 million or billion, $100 trillion of household wealth is controlled by the US. That's 1/3 of all the money in the world. So, America really matters. And so I think Libra is a big deal. And even though it's a stable coin, you have to remember the primary use of any stable coin is to speculate on the price of something else. So if Libra is successful, it's a massive, massive win for crypto. I believe Libra will be successfully launched. So I think it's obviously going to be a very big positive.
So you think that it will be when?
It's hard to know, but I think the mistake Libra made and Facebook made was really not getting the buy-in from regulators and traditional financial industry. I've followed wireless for 17 years. Wireless was part of the telecom industry. That's highly regulated. Anytime you have an industry that's highly regulated, whether it's airlines, healthcare, financials, or telecom, you need to involve the regulators at every step. That's what banks are really good at. That's why banks have lobbyists for the Democratic members of the Financial Services Committee and the Republican members. I don't think Facebook played that game as well, but the game's not over. They can make that investment, and I think that's the investment they need to make.
When talking about US, right, of course, the first thing that comes into mind is SEC, regulations, Bitcoin ETF, and the way the US government is trying to, in my opinion, maybe a little bit pause this thing. But as I know, you have a different opinion, right? You think that SEC is doing the right job, doing it right way, all this Telegram rejections, all of this stuff. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, a very unpopular opinion that we have, but I think it does get people mad. I think the SEC is doing a great job. If you're involved in crypto, the SEC could look like an obstacle because they're really, they're not making clear what you can do. They've really kind of put the hammer down on ICOs in the US. Now looks like they're trying to block Telegram or Ton and Gram before it really even moves forward. But the reason I think they're actually doing a good job is they're establishing protections for individuals. And right now it's not convenient for the industry, but if the SEC, is someone that people trust and is protecting individuals, that's how you get mainstream willing to get involved with crypto. I mean, the institutions aren't going to touch crypto if they think the SEC is not doing their job. So I think right now the banks are saying, look, the SEC is getting it. They're trying to shut down rogue projects. They're trying to make sure that it's the same ground rules as U.S. companies. And once that's kind of a generalized belief and projects kind of realign that way, the SEC will greenlight a lot of mainstream projects. So it's really good. I think the SEC is doing a great job.
Even with ETFs?
Yeah, and especially with ETFs. We're seeing round after round of ETFs being rejected, and I think every time, and I think for instance, Bitwise I think did a pretty good job with putting forth a document that the SEC could sort of understand. I wouldn't say it was like people agree it's completely right, but understanding the nature of true volume versus fake volume. But the bigger problem is the crypto market is too small for an ETF. So I think the SEC needs to kind of delay or punt the ETF until crypto becomes bigger. And the reason for that, and we've written about it so our clients are aware of it, is the demand for an ETF is monstrous. The top 10 ETFs most successful launched in the US have an average of $13 billion of first year demand. Okay? That's, you have to remember that's fiat to crypto demand, 13 billion. Unless Bitcoin's price is over 150,000, the daily block rewards are smaller than just the daily demand from an ETF. If you had to solve it, Bitcoin's price has to be well over 100,000 to be the right size to accommodate an ETF, or the day that an ETF gets approved, Bitcoin's price is going to hit six figures. So I think right now it makes sense to just let the SEC kind of delay, let the industry get deeper regulations, better infrastructure, and it's all going to be good.
So what you say that SEC is doing the right thing with ETF, right? So tell me if I'm right or wrong, right? So the right timing to do it is when Bitcoin is around 150,000?
Yes, that's right. In other words, for Bitcoin to be 100,000, it just needs to have more users.
I got it. We are pretty short on time, but I want to talk about halving, because everyone is waiting for halving. That will be the third halving in the Bitcoin's history. Two last ones, they caused the bull run, right? There are lots of uncertainty about the upcoming halving in 2020. So what do you think about? How will it influence the price, the market?
Yeah, I think it's actually important. But even though it might be conceptually odd to think halvening should drive the price, right? Because the idea is halvening is going to be, if you believe in stock to flow, it's a reduction of supply, so the price should adjust. But a lot of people will say, well, if it's priced in, why would the price move? I think that's actually the wrong question, because if you look at traditional markets, there is so much seasonality. The stock market has the best 6 months. Earnings move stock prices. Announcements move stock prices. If the halvening is something that the industry believes is important, and in fact, because adoption starts to pick up, right? Next year, maybe there's a lot of people who are saying, well, the only time Bitcoin's gone up is halvening, so I won't open a Coinbase account until that happens. Well, that means it's going to move the price. So I think it is indeed a true catalyst for 2020.
I got it. When you say pricing, you mean that the effect of halving is already happening, right? So the recent spike to this 12K, let's say, is it because of halving?
I don't know what's priced into Bitcoin. Nobody knows, and there's no investor relations department to tell me. But no, I don't think the move to 12,000 is due to the halvening. So I think that if, you have to respect seasonal patterns. So I'm saying if in the past Bitcoin's price had a steady ramp into the halvening, and then its rate of change increased, right? So it had a parabolic move after the halvening. There's no reason not to believe that won't happen again this time.
I got you. We are pretty short on time. Let's see if we have some questions on Slido. Just a second. About miners companies. Okay, let's do this one. It's an anonymous question. The question is Bitcoin too big to fail?
I mean, too big to fail, I think, is a term that people used with regard to banks and the 2008 financial crisis. And the reason that term came up was that banks in America had gotten so big that, and actually in Europe, that their failure potentially was going to drag down the global economy. Bitcoin is not that situation. So if that's the reason that someone's asking that, I don't think it's that big to fail. I mean, Bitcoin, in theory, could fail and crypto could do well. Oh. But the reality is, more likely outlook is that Bitcoin needs to succeed before the rest of crypto actually does well.
Thank you, Tom. Before we end our conversation, I would like to do a short poll. In our Twitter, we have a poll saying like bull or bear in 2020. So let's do like that. Those who think that bull will win in 2020, put your hands up. Those who think bear will win? Okay. Tom, what's your opinion? Bull or a bear in 2020?
I was going to be bullish, but there's a lot of people bullish. I think crypto does well next year, but usually the crowd has priced a lot in. So if people are bullish, that means there's already a lot priced in. It means that if the crowd is wrong, Bitcoin either does way better than you all expect, or it does a lot worse.
Let's say, just simply, you're bullish on crypto in 2020.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Tom, for this discussion. Thanks, everybody, for your questions and Slido and for coming today to BlockShow. Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you, Thomas and Addy, for those predictions.